Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Southern Reads Podcast, the show where I talk about books and only books and everything book related. And today I am joined by Mr. Mark Jamilkowski. He is a first-time author, a co-founder of a healthcare startup, a husband, and father. He enjoys music, reading, and researching games of strategy, photography, cooking, and writing. He is the author of The Road to Moresco, a historical fiction novel released in August of 2023 to tell the incredible story of a mother and her daughter beginning in early 1900s Italy. The story of these persistent and resilient women is complex, intimate, and inspiring. And today he's here to share a little bit more about his book, share a little bit about the process he went into writing this book, and just spill all the details about it. So
Mhm.
Mark, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. I'm really looking forward to hearing about the book.
Excellent. And I have to update my profile information evidently because I published my second book last fall called The Mask of Romulus. So there's more than one to talk about now. I've been bitten by the bug and I can't turn back. Now I have to going to be writing for, but we absolutely, the road to Moresco is very special to me. It was my first effort. As you pointed out, first time I wrote a book. It was a very personal story. It's historical fiction to be certain, and it does follow the life of two specific women over the 1900s, basically from their life and and the history of their families, kind of encompassing the history of Italy and Europe from 1860 all the way up to 2020. Um, so it's a bit of an epic in that regard. Um, but it has more biography to it and history than fiction. It's sort of the fiction part's in there to weave it all together, right? And fill in the blanks where we don't know what was said and what was done. But it was definitely a work of passion, that one. Very, very close and near and dear to my heart.
So we'll start with the Road to Moresco. So as I had mentioned in the um intro, it's a
Mm,
historical fiction novel that kind of
yep.
focuses on a mother and daughter. Uh,
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write that story and what was kind of the research and process like for you.
Sure. Well, the big catalyst for writing that story was a decision I made about 12 years ago to try to find my birth mother. I'm adopted, and I didn't really know the backstory, and was something that had kind of hung over me, I always knew I was adopted, so that wasn't the issue. It was more about who were these people and what were the circumstances, right? Um, when I did the research, I ended up finding my birth mother, and Clara became a relationship that I really cherished. And before she passed away, I was able to learn a fair amount about her life and the relationship that she had with her mother. And by extension, I found out a fair amount about her mother's life. That was the catalyst because the story that I tell in The Road to Moresco is all about Maria Luisa Moresco, my birth maternal grandmother, and her daughter, Chiara, later named Clara Moresco, who was my maternal, birth mother. Um, Story really doesn't revolve around me. There's nothing really centered on my interactions with them, except for like one chapter at the very end. But it just fascinated me to learn more about their history, what they lived through, the kinds of trials and traumas that they had to endure, ultimately that led up to circumstances and decisions that resulted in, well, frankly, me, you know. So that was all very fascinating to me, and that was the impetus behind the why I wrote the story. Research was arduous. I dug into a lot of history to can put the story into context. Simple things like, you know, why did Maria Luisa move from one part of Italy to another part? And then what were the catalysts that made her then move from there into Germany that put her in the crosshairs of World War II and, US and Russian forces as Germany collapsed? And what happened next and why were they there? And those why questions led to the need to really research and dig into very specific points of time in history to learn more about the human element of war that was happening around them. I don't deal with battles and things like that. It's always about the human element and how they were impacted by what was going on at the time.
So for when you were doing research, was there anything that was real shocking to kind of hear, or was there any kind of things that happened in the from your research that was really surprising for you to learn?
Yeah, I think that as I was digging into things, I was fascinated by how fascism, the rise of Mussolini, the rise of nationalism, how Italy and Germany were on similar paths towards national identity. Um, I really didn't understand, I guess, from school and whatever you learn in school. I didn't really understand where all that came from. It just we just read about it, right? We study it, we study the people, the places, the things they did, but we don't understand like where that all like what was the emotion and how do they come to have such strong beliefs in that regard? Um, so I think for me, the more surprising element of everything was that, and then the other piece that kind of stuck out for me uh, probably wasn't until the 1950s, 1960s time period when I was digging into some of my research there. I don't know, maybe because I was taking it for granted. There were certain elements of society, uh, things that were happening during that time period, which were happening across the globe without really being coordinated. They were all kind of happening at the same time. It was fascinating to see the same level of let's call it social upheaval. You know, the same type of stuff that was happening here was happening in Germany, was happening in Italy, was happening in France. It wasn't coordinated in any way. They didn't have TikTok or anything like that to Snapchat to coordinate messaging and effort. But there was the same. It was very interesting to me to see how similar we were and are. The differences are outweighed by the similarities in a lot of ways.
So when the book was finally released, what was kind of the critical reception, and how did you go about promoting the book itself?
Oh, the first book, um, I was naive. I think, and to some extent, even my first book, I was a little scared. You know, um, it was a soft sell. I published it, and yeah, I'm not represented by an agent or anything, and so it's very much. I was lucky enough to find an editor and a publisher who wanted to work with me. Very much an indie press kind of situation, right? Um, we put it through Kindle, direct publishing, KDP, and Amazon and all that, which is a great platform, for getting independent authors published and supporting the publication of works. But I really did not understand the game in terms of promotion or marketing or anything that went into all of that. For my second book, I was a little bit more savvy, so I started doing um, reviews and canvassing for reviews and doing some advanced, coming soon kind of posts and social media and trying to build up some buzz. And I got some advanced reader copies out in front of people on Goodreads and things like that. um, trying to build up more of more momentum prior to the second book being published. Um, Given what I had learned with the first book, the critics are like my work. I by and large get 4 or 5 type ratings. I won a couple of juried book contests. So on the strength of the feedback from the first book, kind of gave me the energy and the willingness to go into writing a second book, right?
Mm,
Um, and in so writing the second book and kind of having now again favorable feedback and strong words of encouragement, I'm writing my third. Um, I'm not necessarily writing the book for purposes of getting the accolades, but the accolades certainly help to encourage that my writing finds an audience that it resonates with. Um, yeah, I've received some personal feedback from some of the people who've done reviews. Like on the first book, they were like, "Oh my God, this is so emotional. I cried, I laughed, it changed my life." Which is, all you need is one person to tell you that, right? And it kind of makes the whole effort worthwhile to some extent. Um, yeah, so I've been blessed with some really great feedback, and the second book was a little bit trickier in a lot of ways because the first book was very personal, right? It had a lot to do with people who I knew and conversations I actually had, and I could really anchor the story on things that I knew, right? The second book being about Augustus and ancient Rome and ancient India, much different, right? Now I'm having to create a world and recreate a relationship in a time period which I don't have any firm footing, and I don't have someone I can just go interview and fill in the detail and see what would happen, right? I very much had to do a lot more research for the second book to really understand the people behind the actions and the activities and the decisions in order to kind of paint the same type of picture. Again, not focusing on wars and the military elements of ancient Roman Empire, but rather the people and what they were living through and what their connection was as people in a relationship. Um, so the marketing aspect of things really has been a learning curve. And I would say I still struggle with it. I don't have a very strong, being an indie author, right? You don't have the support of a Random House type of budget, right? To go out and promote your book and pump tens of thousands of copies out to all types of media outlets and to get all that type of awareness and press. You're very much left to do it on your own. And unfortunately, there's a lot of noise out there that gets in the way. So it's hard for anybody who's really looking for stuff to get truth. Instead, they get a lot of noise, which is hard to combat. I do the best I can, as much as I can. I have a 9 to 5 job, right? That pays the bills and keeps the lights on. So, uh, so I have to make sure that I'm doing that. But the writing is still a very valued creative outlet for me, even though the marketing aspect of it is kind of a drain.
who have been some big influences for your writing career, and who are some big influences about for the books that you have published about how they inspired you to create these novels and create these books?
Yeah. I have a wide variety of authors that have influenced me. I look at some of the imagination of like an Isabel Allende, just and Salman Rushdie, and some of the stories and the way they tell their stories and the almost mystical or ephemeral way that they kind of blend their characters together into the stories so that even though there's elements of history and there are components of society that are going on around them, those pieces almost feel like other characters in their stories. I always been very uh, sort of influenced by the nature of the writing, the prose. You know, look at other people too, like Saul Bellow. I mean, how do you not be influenced by someone who's uh, of such literary accolades? And F. Scott Fitzgerald. Again, the way they approach their topics and sort of from you're not coming directly on, you're sort of coming at it from the side and describing an environment or something so simple as having two characters sitting down in a cafe having a cup of coffee can be gripping. And in its simplicity, there's so many nuances, and making those nuances just so powerful and palatable that they drive the story forward with even more momentum and emotional intensity. That to me is those are some of the examples that I can pull on to kind of where I think this is something that I want to be able to do. Sort of some combination of all of that.
Looking through your whole journey and looking at your whole writing career, what's been the biggest achievement and most thing that you're most proud of?
Just publishing in the first place, you know, pressing that go button, that was so intimidating the first time just to say, go ahead and publish. You're kind of opening yourself up to people who don't know your story or why you wrote it, and they could hate it. And yeah, you just don't know what the reception is going to be like in some cases, right? Well, at least in the first one, when I didn't do anything in advance of actually publishing the story, right? Um, Not that receiving negative criticism is necessarily the go or no go kind of thing, but the vulnerability that implies, the willingness to accept that vulnerability and be open to that criticism and expose yourself in a very intimate way to the rest of the world. If you think really hard about it, there's something to be proud of to be able to say, I'm willing to do that. So that's the thing that kind of resonates the most for me.
I know you had mentioned at the beginning that you had a third book coming out. Can you share a little bit about what the third book will kind of be the center point of, and
Mhm.
or are you able to share any of that with my audience today?
Sure. A little bit different, a little bit different. This time, it's centered around sort of conspiracy theories and spies and the Freemasons and Poland, going back to like the 1800s and early 1900s. It's fascinating digging into some of this stuff because sometimes it's just like one key element which creates the trigger and suddenly the whole story just opens up right in front of you. And
Mm.
for me it was I just I just happened to be reading something a website or a magazine or e-zine whatever and I was talking about the assassination of the Polish president in 1921. And I just suddenly in my mind, I had this twist that, it was the guy who assassinated the elected president in 1921 back in Poland, was an artist. And he was a frustrated politician. And he just, everything in his life wasn't necessarily going the way he wanted to. So, he paints a very desperate picture, right, in terms of who he is. But what if he was manipulated? What if there's a mechanism, like a machinery, a spy-based machinery that was behind the scenes that manipulated him and drove him and radicalized him to a point where he then committed this act? And what if the people who did that were still alive today, but they're hiding their secret, right? And that's the genesis of it. So you start to unravel all of these hidden relationships between countries. Then I found out that Poland, or what became Poland, the people who were behind, the Polish movement and sort of the underground who were resisting Russian occupation and ultimately became the leaders of what was to become Poland after World War I, World War II. Those people had an alliance with Japan. Let's think about this for a second. Poland emerges from World War I, has an alliance with Japan. What if Russia never gets off the ground and Japan, instead of aligning itself with Germany, decides to work with Poland and attack Russia? Because that's what they were planning to do. They want to eliminate Russia. It's just the open world possibilities of this alternate kind of situation, right? Which almost came to be. It's fascinating to me. Yeah. Yeah. So that's I'm investigating that and kind of putting a story around now that whole that tension, right? And trying to create something which is going to be very a storytelling that weaves that spy-based kind of conspiracy theory, but yet still a very emotional and soul-searching kind of book together. And hopefully that'll be just as enjoyable as the other two.
Well, Mark, I appreciate you so much for coming on the podcast today to share your books and everything with my audience. For if anyone's interested in learning more about the books, so they would like to follow you to kind of keep up to date with all the books that you have going on, where can they
Hmm?
go to purchase them? Where can they go to follow you? And just most
Hmm?
importantly, just feel free to promote everything you have going on.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, clearly I'm on Amazon. I've got the full authors page there, and um, all the books are, and I have audiobook, hardcover, paperback, ebook. My books are always free for those who use Kindle Unlimited subscriptions. I'm also on Barnes and Noble. I also sell books directly. Autographed books are available on my website as well, Mark-Jamilkowski-author.com. And you can find me on X, otherwise known as Twitter, as well as on Instagram. So feel free to hit me up and look up my works. There's a lot of reviews on me on Untold Reads. You can find published reviews on me on Goodreads as well. Yeah, I'm trying to get out there and let people hear hear about me and all that. Like I said, when I get a chance to get reviewed professionally, uh, I get some pretty strong reviews. So yeah, books worth books worth reading, right?
And I will put all these links in the description box below. I'll put his website, socials, and just everything will be in the description box in the show notes. So just feel free to go check that out to learn more about him and learn more about what he has going on in the future. Feel free to follow the podcast on the socials. So you can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Southern.Reads. You can also reach out to me on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcast. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. It's just my first and last name, Noah May, on there. And I'm also on Goodreads. I'm on Fable. I'm on Storygraph, Margins, basically all the book apps as well. I'll put
Well,
all those links down there below, so that there I've kind of been slacking on mentioning those because I forgot about it till he just said Goodreads and it just triggered a light bulb in my head. But I'll put all those links down below for you guys as well. If you like today's show, subscribe to it so you get notified when new episodes come out. And you can find all this information through my website, noahspodcast.com. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning in today's episode. I hope you really all enjoyed it. Have a great rest of your day. Be safe, and I will catch you in the next episode of Southern Reads.